In Stoic philosophy, the concept of passion, or pathos, holds a central role in understanding human suffering and self-deception. The Stoics, particularly thinkers like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, perceived passion not in the modern sense of intense enthusiasm, but as irrational and excessive emotions that disturb the soul. These passions, they argued, are rooted in false judgments and distorted perceptions, creating a false identity that veils the rational self. The Stoics believed that to live virtuously, and in accordance with nature, one must strip away these delusions and return to the true self, a being governed by reason, integrity, and self-mastery. This philosophical journey is not merely intellectual but existential, as it redefines how we see ourselves, others, and the world. Pathos, in the Stoic framework, includes emotions like fear, desire, grief, and pleasure when they are based on false beliefs. For example, fear may arise from the mistaken belief that something external can truly harm the self. Likewise, intense desire often stems from the illusion that external objects, wealth, status, approval, are necessary for happiness. These emotional responses, when left unchecked, dominate the mind and create a distorted self-concept. The individual begins to identify with these passions, believing that they are naturally anxious, angry, or greedy, when in fact these states are symptoms of unexamined beliefs. The Stoics held that the only true good is virtue, and anything that pulls the mind away from it is a form of self-alienation. A person dominated by passions is, according to the Stoics, enslaved. They are at the mercy of external events and internal compulsions. When something desirable is threatened, or something feared comes to pass, the passionate individual is thrown into turmoil. This instability reveals a false foundation of identity, one built not on inner strength, but on the shifting sands of circumstance. The Stoics compared such a life to being a puppet, pulled by invisible strings. The remedy then lies in reclaiming one's autonomy through reason and virtue. The path to freedom is not through changing the world, but through changing the way we perceive and respond to it. One of the most powerful illustrations of this idea is found in the writings of Epictetus. Born into slavery, Epictetus taught that external conditions do not determine who we are. Our judgments do. He insisted that we must learn to distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. The passions arise when we attempt to control the uncontrollable, or when we stake our identity on things beyond our power. If we believe that our worth depends on others' opinions, we become anxious and desperate for approval. If we think our security lies in wealth, we are constantly fearful of loss. These attachments are illusions that foster a false self, one that is fragmented and reactive rather than whole and deliberate. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, explored these themes in his personal reflections. In Meditations, he repeatedly urges himself to return to the inner citadel, the part of the soul untouched by external chaos. He recognized that the passions are not mere feelings, but philosophical errors. They indicate that the mind has given assent to a false proposition. Anger, for example, is not a spontaneous reaction, but the result of believing that someone has done wrong and that this wrong affects one's essential being. The Stoic response is not suppression, but correction, to examine the belief, recognize its falsity, and align the judgment with reason. In doing so, the passion dissolves and the true self reemerges. Seneca, too, warned against the tyranny of the passions. In his essays and letters, he described how unchecked emotions can lead to ruin, both personally and politically. For Seneca, the sage is one who remains unmoved, not because he lacks feeling, but because he has trained his soul to value only what truly matters. He compared passions to diseases of the soul, curable through philosophy. The person who identifies with passion is like someone in a fever who believes their distorted sensations are real. Recovery begins with awareness, the recognition that the storm inside is not the self, but a clouding of reason. Through this awareness, one begins to see how much of life has been lived under false pretenses. False identity through passion is not merely a philosophical abstraction, but a deeply relevant issue in contemporary life. Modern society, with its relentless emphasis on image, success, and emotional expression, often encourages people to define themselves by their feelings and experiences. We are told to follow our passions, to seek validation, to pursue happiness through external achievements. Yet this very pursuit can entangle us in the same illusions the Stoics warned against. If we believe we are our desires, our fears, our traumas, or our ambitions, we risk losing sight of the deeper, more stable self that is rooted in reason and virtue. The emotional self becomes a mask, a persona, shaped by cultural expectations and personal insecurities. The Stoics offered practical exercises to combat this false identity. One such practice is premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. By imagining potential setbacks, losses, or rejections, one prepares the mind to face them without distress. This exercise reveals that the self remains intact regardless of what happens. Another practice is view from above, in which one visualizes their life from a cosmic perspective, seeing the fleeting nature of individual concerns. These exercises train the mind to detach from passionate identification and to reorient toward the universal. They foster humility, clarity, and resilience, traits of the true self. Moreover, the Stoic concept of oikeiosis, the natural orientation towards self-preservation and rational development, shows that identity is not static but cultivated. We begin life with instincts, but as we grow, reason emerges and invites us to live more fully in accordance with nature. This development requires shedding false selves, those shaped by fear, greed, vanity, and ignorance, and embracing the rational nature that binds us to humanity and the cosmos. In this sense, identity is not something given, but something earned through philosophical labor. The passionate self is an immature self, while the rational self is the realized self. The process of disidentifying from the passions can be painful. It means confronting illusions, letting go of attachments, and facing the emptiness left behind. But this emptiness is not a void. It is space for truth. It is the ground upon which a real life can be built. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The passions, though obstacles, are also opportunities. They show us where we are clinging, where we are misaligned, and where we must grow. Each struggle with fear, envy, or anger is a chance to reclaim the self. In essence, the Stoic journey is one of returning. It is a return to the self that was always there but obscured by noise. The self that does not demand applause, that does not shatter with loss, that does not burn with every insult. This self is not indifferent in the sense of coldness, but in the sense of equanimity. It loves wisely, acts justly, speaks truthfully, and endures calmly. It is the eye in the storm, the flame that burns steady. To reach this state is not to erase emotion, but to harmonize it with reason, to let feeling serve virtue rather than vice. False identity through passion is a form of spiritual amnesia. We forget who we are because we are seduced by who we are not. We chase shadows, mistaking them for substance. We fear ghosts, believing them real. The Stoics remind us that the path home begins with a single act of recognition, to see that the voice of panic, the heat of rage, the ache of desire, these are not the self. They are visitors, and we, the hosts, have the power to greet them with wisdom, or to let them take over the house. Philosophy, then, becomes the art of hospitality, welcoming only what is true and good, and kindly showing the rest the door. Thus, the Stoic teaching on pathos and false identity offers more than self-control. It offers liberation. It frees the soul from bondage to transient moods and misleading impressions. It grounds the self in something enduring, the capacity to reason, to choose, to grow in virtue. In a world of noise and haste, of ego and illusion, this grounding is a radical act. It is a quiet revolution, not in society, but in the soul. And from this inner freedom, all outer actions gain clarity and power. The self that emerges from the fire of pathos is not weakened, but refined. It is not a victim of life, but its conscious participant. And in this, the Stoics found the highest form of human dignity.